Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is JB. Welcome to the All Things Mechanical YouTube channel, where today we actually have something mechanical to talk about. As you guys can probably see, judging from my last video to now, I've trimmed the beard. Mrs. Mechanic just wasn't having the long beard anymore. I was kind of fed up with it too, because it was growing every which way except down, and I'm glad to have it shortened back up again. So what we're going to be talking about today is unfortunately more of a warning than anything else, and I'm again just going to preface the video by saying this is mostly going to be talking. I'll roll in some video clips here every now and then of stuff that I discovered before my truck ended up in the shop. But suffice it to say, if you drive Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Yukon XL, Suburban, what have you, anything with a 6L80E transmission, this is for you. Now, I know that the 6L80 transmission has been used in a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, it was one of the first transmissions that GM came out with when they went from the 4L60 up to the 6-speeds. And they've only, increased from there. Obviously now we have the 8L90 and, a few other 8-speed transmissions, 10-speed transmissions, 48 freaking speed transmissions in some of the heavier duty trucks. I don't know. But this video is for you if you drive a vehicle equipped with a 6L80. About a month ago now, I was driving this truck, and I don't drive the truck very often. As you guys probably know if you followed the channel for any length of time, about a year and a half ago, I left my longtime job out at the cattle ranch I used to work for. I was one of the lead mechanics out there, pretty much the only mechanic out there. And I took a remote IT job. I work for the same company that my wife works for. So we don't leave the house very much. We're kind of homebodies now, and we live in a major metropolitan area now. We're in the Salt Lake Valley. So when we do leave the house, we don't have to travel very far. It's all highway driving on paved roads around here, okay? This truck has had a very, very easy life in the last 18 months. It hasn't been on dirt. It hasn't had to travel over washboard roads. And because of that, and because the grocery stores are so close now, my wife is really the only one that drives this thing. I hardly ever go out. So I hopped in it for the first time in a long time, a couple weeks ago, about a month ago now, actually, just to run to Ace Hardware up the street here to get some stuff for a project in the garage. And I noticed a strange sound that I'd never heard before, and it was very, very faint. My wife never even picked up on it. I had to point it out to her when we were driving, but it was almost like a really faint whirring noise, like a metal on metal, almost like a fan, if that makes sense. I don't even know how to describe the noise other than that. It changed with RPM as the vehicle accelerated, and I only noticed it between first and third gear. Going faster than that, the tire noise and engine noise and everything else from this just regular road noise drowned it out. I couldn't hear it. So it was a little bit concerning to me that it was RPM dependent, which immediately leads me toward not wheels and tires or brakes or anything like that, but more driveline related, because how fast you were going didn't matter. It was the RPMs of the engine that mattered. So I started having some concerns, and then I pulled the transmission dipstick out just to check it, and I saw a lot of gray buildup, gray metallic buildup on the transmission dipstick, which in and of itself isn't a huge deal. Transmissions produce wear metal. They're designed to wear out eventually. You have clutch friction plates, clutch steels, all kinds of different mechanical parts moving around in there, and I'm no automatic transmission expert by any stretch, okay? So don't take anything that I'm saying as gospel. I had to have the pros take care of this, but I noticed this buildup on the dipstick, wiped it clean, put it back in, checked the oil level. Oil level was fine. Fluid looked faded a little bit, but it looked okay. Definitely didn't smell burnt. I didn't have any issues like that. So I put the transmission dipstick back in there. And then later that same day, we were driving back from my sister-in-law's house about 20 minutes north of where we live. And we were driving down the road doing about 60, 65, decelerating, coming to a red light. And all of a sudden the truck goes like we were going over like rumble strips. All right, that's the only thing I can equate it to. It felt like we were going over rumble strips in like a highway construction zone or something. It was very jarring and very loud and very brief. It only lasted a second or two, and then it was done. But I started doing some Googling, and I really did not like what I was reading. Honestly, guys, I should know about this more, but ever since taking the job out at the ranch and buying this truck, I've been really disconnected from online forums, Facebook groups, anything like that where issues like this are discussed on a more regular basis. But apparently torque converter shutter and failed torque converter clutch assemblies are a huge problem with the 6L80 transmissions. And after reading a very, very detailed technical article that Sonnax put out, and if you know who the company Sonnax is, they're an excellent manufacturer of both OEM parts and upgrade parts for torque converters, transmissions, things like that. These guys know what they're doing. And that tech article explained in some very good detail what might actually be happening with these transmissions. They were very reluctant to actually say, yes, this is a definitive answer, but everything that they were describing in that article matches the symptoms of this truck to the T. And they posit some very, very good theories as to what might be happening. So if you drive a truck with a 6L80 transmission, I encourage you to go right now out to your garage, out to your driveway, out to wherever you can work on a flat surface, get a drip tray, a sheet of cardboard, and a 10mm socket and a ratchet, and drop your transmission pan. Right now, go do it. It's worth the cost of the 6 quarts or so of ATF you're going to need. Go to O'Reilly's, go on Amazon and order some AC Delco Deck 6, get some Valvoline Deck 6, whatever. Get some fluid to refill your pan, pull the thing off, and check your transmission pan for debris right now. If you don't have any debris in your transmission pan, take your truck to a transmission shop, have them yank the stock JMBX torque converter out of your 6L80 and throw it in the frickin' garbage can, and spend the money on a billet torque converter. Do it now, budget it out, do it ASAP, because the ones that come with these transmissions are ticking bombs. I am absolutely stunned that I have to put a video out bashing Chevy or GM in general for something like this, but essentially what it boils down to is that the stock torque converters, they absolutely cheaped out on the design. They changed the specs on the covers for these torque converters. And I am not a torque converter expert. I am not a transmission expert. This is all the information that I have been reading from the article that Sonnax released, which I will link in the description because I suggest that you read it. If you have any basic mechanical understanding at all, you need to read that article, and it will help explain better than I can even in this video about what's going on. But they cheaped out on the design of these torque converters. The plates are too thin. The apply pressure for the torque converter clutch is too low. Essentially what happens is under normal driving conditions, the covers for these torque converters will flex. The torque converter clutch makes contact with the cover, but that was the source of the noise that I was hearing, okay? When that happens, you got metal on metal contact and you're generating a ton of debris inside the torque converter. What does the torque converter share with the transmission? The fluid. So by the torque converter starting to eat itself, you are contaminating the fluid for the entire transmission. You're circulating all kinds of metal through the valve body, through the clutch packs, through all of the oil passages and everything in your transmission, and through the pump, okay? So when I read this tech article, I immediately went out to my garage and I tried to suck some fluid up through the dipstick tube, but my little hand pump didn't work. I'll roll in some footage of that here in just a second, but what I pulled out of the dipstick tube made me really nervous. I just changed the transmission fluid in this truck at about 80,000 miles. I did it once at about 45,000 miles, and then I did it a little bit right before we moved off of the ranch. I did it again. So it's been, the truck has 113,000 miles on it right now, and the transmission fluid has already been cycled out twice. Okay? So really, the fluid should not have been as dark as it was, but it was really, really dark. Let me roll in that footage right now for you guys to show you what I pulled out of the dipstick tube. Well, guys, a slight update here, and it's not looking good. The fluid doesn't smell burnt, but this is what's coming out of the dipstick tube. I cannot get this stupid little suction pump to work. It's one of those little hand pump things. It's a piece of garbage. They all are. I've had it for years. It's probably just dried out. I did dump a little oil in it, try to lubricate that O-ring, but as you can see by these bubbles climbing back up, that's, you know, transmission fluid is supposed to be bright red, and this is awfully dark, and there is some what looks like metallic debris coming out. It's kind of hard to tell now, especially because this is my oil drain pan that I use for pretty much everything. So there's a lot of dirt and stuff on here, but definitely looks like we have some metallic material in the oil, or the transmission fluid rather. So I am, yeah, I'm pretty bummed. So anyway, can't stop now. I got to get this pan off and actually confirm what I'm looking at. But this fluid was changed with AMSOIL Signature Series ATF, and I think I changed the transmission fluid at like 75 or 80. So it's not that much time on this transmission fluid. Not looking good. Not that great looking. In fact, pretty scary looking. That's really dark fluid. Now, Transmission fluid, it gets exposed to tremendous amounts of heat and pressure. That's normal, all right? It will discolor and fade over time, but getting that dark, that was a little bit extreme. That let me know that there was something else going on. So I went down and I pulled the transmission pan off of this truck. Now, guys, there is a lot of videos out there that says you gotta jack up your transmission and you gotta pull down your exhaust with a ratchet strap and a bottle jack and all this stuff. You don't need to do that. You can pull the transmission pan off of one of these things, get your catch pan, drop the back half of the transmission pan down, let the fluid drain out as best you can, grab that filter with the pan still attached and hanging down, grab the filter and pull it out, and that will give you all the clearance you need to snake the filter the rest of the way out of there. You don't have to disconnect the exhaust. You don't need to pull it down. You don't need to disconnect your transmission crossmember and jack your transmission and transfer case up. Don't do any of that crap. Just take the filter out first with the pan still attached, and that will give you the clearance you need to finagle the pan the rest of the way out, okay? I did that, and this clip is what I found in the bottom of my trans pan. Well, guys, it's the next morning, and I got bad news. I kind of thought I'd have bad news. We got piles of metal in the bottom of the transmission. Now, this is not as bad as some of the ones I've seen on YouTube, but it's pretty bad. There's bits of this circulating all through the oil that came out of the transmission pan. Yeah, I was pissed. I was really upset, especially after reading that tech article by Sonnax. This is a widespread problem. There are reports of this all over the forums, all over Facebook groups. This is a widespread issue caused by a absolute bullshit design on GM's part, and they still have not stepped up to fix this problem. Okay? I called the service manager, the actual service manager at the dealership where we bought the truck. I told him what was going on. I told him how upset I was. I was very polite about it. He's a good dude. He's very honest with me and very forthcoming. He said, look, you bring me the truck, I can get you a reman GM transmission. It's going to cost you $6,600 out the door. I have you out in 2 days. But here's the deal. They have not updated the torque converter design. I can put it in for you, but if I do that, it's very likely you're going to end up in the same boat with the same failure problem, because these torque converters are just a problem all over the place. He says I get an average of between 2 and 5 of these trucks a month in my shop. So I said, all right. Let me do some thinking on it. $6,600 is a lot of money. I called around a couple other transmission shops, and I ended up landing on a shop in Lehi, Utah called Gears. And I'll tell you what, little mom and pop shop, and they know what the heck they are doing, for sure. I called them, and I spoke to the owner's wife. I think it's Karen and Mike that own the shop. I spoke to Karen on the phone. Karen immediately impressed me with how much she knew about not only this transmission, but the transmission industry in general. And she said that going even above and beyond what the dealership was quoting me as far as how many units they get in per month, she said she sees an average of 2 to 3 of these a week in her shop. She had 2 trucks in there already in front of mine. And her quote was about the same. It was about $6,500, but she was going to rebuild my original transmission case with all kinds of upgraded parts, because they know these issues, they see these issues, and they know what they need to do to not bulletproof the transmission. She was very careful not to say that we'll never have a problem again, but she knew that there are some parts that she could install that would drastically improve the reliability on these transmissions. She knows what she's talking about. I already have the truck back. It's been back for a couple of days now. I actually had it towed to their shop about 2.5 weeks ago, and then that was on a Tuesday, and then this past Tuesday we just got the truck back. The total cost out the door for my repairs, with tax and everything included, $6,100, guys. I just had to dump $6,100 into a $50,000 truck, 2018, with 113,000 miles on it. I wrote a scathing letter to GM, and of course I haven't heard anything back. I was ready to trade this thing in. I was ready to, I put the pan back on after I you know, cleaned all the junk out of it. I scrubbed that pan to be as clean as I possibly could get it. Cleaned the magnet, cleaned even the little stampings, the date stampings out of the bottom of that. Cleaned everything out. Put a new gasket up, put a new filter in there. 6 quarts or so of Deck 6 ATF, AC Delco ATF. And I went to a Toyota dealership, and I was ready to trade this thing in on another Land Cruiser or a 4Runner or something. And we test drove several different vehicles. My wife actually really liked the 2021 Highlander that we just test drove. And that vehicle had actually been sold on our test drive. So when we pulled back in, they're like, oh, sorry, another buyer we had that was looking at it finally just called me back and they want it. But we have another one. We can bring it down on Monday for you guys if you're interested. At the end of the day, we got thinking about that and we decided not to trade the truck in. Mostly because we didn't fit that well in a smaller SUV. We just don't. My wife's 6 foot. I'm 6'4", 230, 240. We're tall people. Our kids are tall people. And we like our full-size truck, straight up. And we're glad that we made the decision not to trade it in now after the fact, but had that other Highlander not have been sold during our test drive, we probably would have come home in it and made this thing another dealership's problem, which is a shit move. I know that. It felt bad to me, even considering doing that, because at the time when I cleaned everything up and put it back together, it was driving fine. And it never got to the point where it was undrivable. I caught the problem early enough where I hadn't burned the pump up, I hadn't burned the clutches up. I mean, it still drove fine. It just shuddered really bad occasionally, every now and then. That was the main symptom that really made me think something bad was happening. But, you know, after all the time and money and work I've put into customizing this truck and setting the suspension up just the way I want it, getting it tuned, all that stuff, I was just pissed. And I'm still pissed that this is even an issue. But the biggest problem that you run into is that when these torque converters grenade, they send all that shrapnel through the system and it's wiping out the pump. That's the really expensive part. There's 2 halves of the pump. There's the bell housing side, which is the forward part of the pump, and the internal stator side of the pump. Luckily, in my case, Karen said that when they tore it down, they said that I'd caught the problem early enough to where the stator side of the pump, which was like $900 by itself, that was okay. They just put a bushing kit in it. They replaced some worn bushings. That was it. That's all it needed. But the bell housing side of the pump was worn beyond acceptable limits. So they did have to replace that, but that was only like $290 compared to the really expensive side of the pump. So we lucked out there, but my total cost out the door for repairing this 6L80 transmission was nearly $6,100. Okay? I don't have that kind of money laying around. I had to take out a freaking personal loan to fix the transmission on this truck. But that being said, I paid $6,100 to have this transmission completely rebuilt from the bottom up and had some really good high quality upgrade parts installed in it that will hopefully improve its longevity. I could have paid $6,600 to the dealership, and just like the service manager told me, they would have put a stock transmission in this thing with the same stock bullshit design on that torque converter. I'm swearing, I apologize. I normally don't do that, but I'm pretty hot about this. And it could fail at 50,000 miles, it could fail at 200,000 miles, but it will fail. It will fail. It's a terrible design, okay? But that being said, the money's already been spent. We've got this transmission fixed. What did they fix? What did they install? All right. So we have a gasket overhaul kit, standard stuff, with the friction module. We have an upgraded molded piston kit. There's a new filter, of course. Sonnax billet torque converter. We have a shift kit with a PR valve fix kit. We have new stator bushings, which I already mentioned. We have a control solenoid and torque converter clutch kit, which upgrades the apply pressure on the torque converter control solenoids. We have a new pump body, which was the bell housing side of the pump that went bad, that was worn beyond acceptable limits. They also found the electrical connector that plugs into the TCM. On the 6L80s, the TCM is actually located on this, built into the case of the transmission. And because we had driven this thing on the ranch for so long and it was so dusty and dirty out there, a bunch of dirt had worked its way into the backside of that connector and completely made it impossible for them to take it apart. They actually had to go into the inside of the transmission to get that connector off, and it just fell into pieces when they got it out. So they replaced that for me. That was an OEM part. It was only like, what, $42.58. Not a big deal. They also installed a transmission thermostat bypass valve kit, which is exactly what I wanted. I actually already own one of those, and I'd been meaning to install it for years and years, and I just forgot to do it. It's in a box somewhere since we moved, but that basically means on the side of these 6L80s, there is actually a thermostat that controls oil flow going up to the transmission cooler. They wanted these things to get hotter faster, just like your engine coolant. The reason your engine has a thermostat on it, GM wanted the transmissions to actually warm up faster so the oil would get thinner and it would improve the EPA gas mileage ratings. I think that's a terrible idea. Heat is what kills transmissions, or bad torque converter designs, but that's neither here nor there at this point. So we bypassed that. We got rid of that. So now as soon as the engine is turned on, the fluid's not going to be contained in the transmission anymore. Immediately it's going to be able to go up to the transmission cooler, and nice cool fluid is going to get shot back to the transmission as soon as we start it up. And then also they had to pull the driveline out, obviously, because they dropped the transmission, and they noticed that both the front and rear U-joints on my drive shaft were starting to take a crap. They were getting really loose, which does not surprise me in the slightest, given the fact that this thing was driven on washboard roads pretty much its entire life out at the ranch. So they replaced those U-joints for me, didn't even charge me labor. They charged me 40 bucks a pop for the U-joints. But total cost out the door, almost 6,100 bucks, $6,091.47. That's with tax and everything included. The actual repair cost was $56.69, but then you got to have Uncle Sam taking his cut, and that ended up being just shy of 6,100 bucks. So I would recommend Gears in Lehi, Utah to anybody in this area if you have a transmission issue, but seriously, get underneath your truck if you have a 6L80, buy some fluid, buy a new filter, and check the pan for debris. If you have no debris in the fluid, put a billet torque converter in. I know there's several companies out there that actually make off-the-shelf billet converters. It's 300 millimeter converter for my particular truck. I don't know. I think that's most of the trucks. But get a billet torque converter if you have a 6L80 transmission, because it's only a matter of time before the stock one craps out on you. I'm sorry that this video has been nothing but me ranting and raving and bitching about GM's terrible quality control and terrible design process, but that's what it boils down to. They have not addressed my concerns. They have not replied to my letter. I was very professional in the letter. I was very hard on them in my letter to them, but I was polite and respectful. But it was very obvious that I was not a happy camper and not a happy customer. And they have ignored me so far. That's been 3 weeks now, almost a month. And now I'm 6,100 bucks in the hole. We still own the truck. It now has a bunch of really high quality parts in the transmission. It shifts wonderfully now. It's, the shift kit they put in, definitely, they reflashed the transmission tune that I had done on it from Black Bear. So I need to do some data logging, and then I need to send that data log back over to Justin at Black Bear Performance so we can compare that. Now that we have the shift kit and the billet converter and everything in it, he's going to make some adjustments if he thinks we need any. Just so we're not, banging this thing through the gears. We don't want to do that. We want to make it drivable and reliable. So, yeah, Justin will amend the tune, but it is what it is. We're in it for the long haul on this truck now. I'm hoping that with regular maintenance, this thing will last a good long time with all these upgraded parts. So it's just a crappy situation, but it is what it is. Anyway, that's all I have for this one, guys. Again, a lot of talking, not a very happy video, but don't end up in the situation that I'm in. Replace that converter. It's about $1,000 for a billet converter, but that's money well spent. It's a heck of a lot cheaper than between $6,100 and $6,600 for a complete rebuild or a reman transmission. So, am I still a Chevy fanboy? Yeah, I am. My older Chevys, anyway. I love my GM vehicles. Will I ever buy a new one again? No, never. I don't like the direction that Chevy is going. I don't like the direction that most new car manufacturers are going. But I'll stick to my older OBS trucks, and if I can find a square body, I'll buy one. Old Chevys, I'm good with. New Chevys, never again. Can't do it. Not unless they prove me wrong somehow. And I don't think that's going to happen. But, Chevy, if you're watching this, shame on you, first of all. And second of all, I really hope that you are thinking about compensating your very loyal customers who have had to deal with this kind of garbage, because it's absolute bullshit. It really is. You know about this problem, you haven't fixed it, and now your customers are paying the price for it. You're eroding your customer base, you are destroying your reputation as a reliable vehicle manufacturer, and I am appalled that this has happened on such a new vehicle. I really am. So I hope you guys get something beneficial out of this very long, very drawn out video of me talking, but it's really important to make sure you stay ahead of the curve on this kind of thing, because if you let your torque converter actually go out on you, you're getting a transmission. There's no other way about it, and they're not cheap. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I know this was a lot of droning on and me talking. I'm not trying to complain or whine. This is just, it is what it is. We made the conscious decision to keep the truck and fix it because we love this vehicle. It fits us right. We've put a lot of time and money into it already, and it made sense. Rather than getting a new vehicle and starting over on a vehicle loan, it just made more sense for us to get a smaller loan to fix the transmission and pay this thing off and keep it and hopefully never have a problem with it again. But like I said, if you drive one of these vehicles with a 6L80 in it, check it. Just check it. It's not that hard to do. Doesn't take that long, and it's relatively inexpensive. So anyway, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much for watching. Be safe. Have fun. Check your transmissions. Keep those fluid levels topped off. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.